So Robert Eggers is quickly climbing the ladder of becoming one of my favorite directors working today because I went on a huge Eggers kick in 2024 watching both The Witch and The Lighthouse, with The Lighthouse in particular being one of my favorite movies that I watched that year. And so to bookend the year, my girlfriend and I decided that it would be a fun idea to go and watch Eggers' latest film, Nosferatu, on New Year's Eve. And honestly, it was an experience. So I'm going to try to keep this video spoiler-free, and if it does well, I might write a spoiler review for the film, so don't forget to show this video support if you enjoy it. But without further ado, let's get into the movie. So historically, Nosferatu was this German expressionist film based pretty heavily on the works of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which truthfully I haven't read or watched any adaptation of, but considering my girlfriend, who has read Stoker's Dracula, basically knew almost everything that happened in the movie, and the fact that Stoker's widow, Florence, successfully sued the creators of the original Nosferatu in 1925 for copyright infringement, it's safe to say that this film and the source material have a lot in common. But if you're like me, who walked into this movie blind, the story of Nosferatu is this reimagining of the original Gothic horror tale set in Europe during the 19th century, which follows Thomas Hutter, a real estate agent played by Nicholas Hoult, who travels to Transylvania to secure a deal with the mysterious Count Orlok, who is played masterfully by Bill Skarsgård. As Hutter spends more time there and begins to discover Orlok's vampiric nature, the Count becomes more fixated on Hutter's wife, Ellen, who is played by Lily Rose Depp, and follows him back to their village, bringing this wake of death and destruction in order to fulfill what he believes was promised to him many years ago. Now, one thing I want to get out of the way is that horror is as broad a genre with a scope as large as even genres like fantasy, and there are many ways directors can approach horrific ideas. Personally, for me, I did not find this movie that scary, though if you're squeamish at the sight of blood, this may get under your skin. In fact, I'd argue, though, that most of the fear factor comes from how Bill Skarsgård plays Count Orlok and the psychological distress that Lily Rose Depp's Ellen puts on display throughout the movie. And starting with Orlok, there was certainly a cartoonish level of villainy for him, and it kind of reminded me a lot of the ways that Ralph Fiennes plays Voldemort in the Harry Potter films. But even though it is hammed up a bit, I did still find it sufficiently disturbing every time he was on screen. And I think there's something about this return to form when it comes to making these classic monster movie monsters terrifying again that I really love, because Skarsgård, alongside with Robert Eggers directing, really nails making Count Orlok this horrific figure. The man is truly a demon, and he has no humanity. There is not a drop of Edward Cullen in this monster at all. And from the way the set is built and how the music is layered and the fact that his audio always goes on top of everything, anytime that Orlok is on screen, he does a really good job at making you feel very uncomfortable. And I think that so much of that credit goes to other characters on screen for making you feel like that. When Nicholas Holt's character is going through it during the film, during the first half of this movie, you are on edge. And while it's not so much a jump scare that you're looking out for, you're constantly on the lookout for the presence of Nosferatu. Sometimes he's there in the shadows, sometimes he looks like this blurry mist that's never truly in focus in either the foreground or the background. But even when he's not on screen, you always feel like he's there. And I think that Eggers' decision to not give the audience a true full-on look as to what Nosferatu looks like for most of the movie was a brilliant decision, because there are a few things as frightening as a mind left to its own devices to have to piece in the gaps that are missing. And honestly, quick shout out to everyone on the team responsible for making Nosferatu look the way he did in this movie. I can't even begin to imagine the amount of work needed in both the makeup and the effects department to make Nosferatu look as horrific as he did, but they did a fantastic job. But outside of Orlok, the other standout character was Lily Rose Depp's Ellen, coming off the nightmare that was The Idol, which was the only other time I'd ever seen her act. I was extremely impressed with her, and no lie, she was incredible. Genuinely, all of the actors brought their A game to this movie, but she was a highlight of the movie for me. Her role was especially challenging because when Nosferatu wasn't on screen, she was the one responsible for bringing out most of the creep factor with her nightmares and her trance-like acting. And that's only one aspect of her character. Continuously, she has to change from this frightened young lady to this doting wife to this protective friend. And it happens so quickly, and yet all of those character transitions that she has to make, they all feel very seamless and real, which is, I imagine, extremely hard to do. Also, I wanted to shout out Willem Dafoe as essentially this movie's version of Van Helsing, because there's something about him when he gets on like an Eggers production, that I think he just brings out like his best self. And this almost comical mad scientist approach that he used for his character worked for me every time and actually managed to pull a few laughs out of me, which does not surprise me very much because he was a lot of the levity in The Lighthouse. And I think he just nailed that again with the type of character he creates his to be. And like to do that all without bringing immersion is also really impressive. But if there's one thing Robert Eggers excels at, it's atmosphere, and Nosferatu is like dripping with it. With its shadowy lighting, its set design, its fog-drenched landscapes, the film feels like it was pulled out of the 19th century. And the cinematography done by Jaron Blasch, I think is how you say it, is like nothing short of breathtaking. The way he'll constantly use light and shadow in this movie to obscure things from sight, particularly Orlok, is just fantastic. And the way that the shadow is shown as like stretching over the town to show his influence in an area was really well done. It's very classic horror, but it was really, really well done. If I'm being honest with you, the only complaint I really have in the cinematography department is the continuous long pans used throughout the movie. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but I felt like it was being used repeatedly to the point that I actually felt myself getting frustrated seeing that again in my seat. Like every time I was like, there's got to be another way to build tension and create that like stress that comes from like the long pan. There's got to be another way. I think Eggers also leans into his love for period authenticity, like from the costumes to the way people talked. Everything felt like meticulously researched and authentic. And Eggers is also this like master of the one take decision, particularly in dialogue heavy scenes, which brings out this like depth to the conversations as they have the ability, like all the characters in the set have the ability to build on each other's horror, particularly when you have the fear of like everyone not understanding what's going on and just having to deal with this horror that's come to their town. But here's my thing. And I hate to say it because I really did like this movie a lot, particularly at the start, and I was genuinely so impressed by the actors in this film, but God, did I hate the ending. And while I can't spoil that in this review, it was just one of those things that I left the theater thinking to myself, was that really the only way we could have ended this story? Was there really nothing else we could do? Why were we dead set on ending the story this way? It just didn't work for me. It left me feeling a little gross. The messaging, I don't know how I feel about that. It's just, I didn't love the ending as much as I wish I did. But here's the thing. I went into Nosferatu without any expectations or knowledge really of the original, and I came out mostly having a good time. This movie doesn't have to rely on nostalgia to work, not that it really could, considering its like release date was almost 100 years ago, but it's a gothic horror story that stands on its own and shows Eggers' skill as a director, especially when paired with stellar performances, haunting visuals, and a sense of dread that lingers long throughout the film. And even though the ending kind of fell flat for me, I'd probably recommend anyone into atmospheric horror to check this movie out. And the originality and the artistry Eggers and his team bring to the film are certainly worthy of your support on that alone. But to end this review, whenever I watch a horror movie with my friends, I always like to play this game where we rank our chances of surviving the movie. And for me, 10 out of 10 times I die. Like, my immune system is not built for the 19th century, and if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Also, if you've seen the film, I'd like to know what you think your chances of survival are. Also, in the comments, feel free to leave your overall thoughts on Eggers' version of Nosferatu. And if you'd like to see more movie reviews in the future, please let me know that down below as well. But really, thank you all so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And I hope you have a great start to your year 2025. Until next time, peace.